I started to feel very, very different. I felt like the only one who had a stepdad, the only poor one, and the only black one. Certainly the only Rastafarian one, right? People, when they're young, you don't want to feel different. And I didn't think drugs were a problem. The drugs I was doing was cocaine, which was posh. Where I was doing it was posh, in very well-to-do people's houses. Remember, I felt like the poor one, so these people were better than me already. And everything that they were doing wasn't wrong. We were doing cocaine. It's what wealthy people do. Try the steps and do them to the best of your ability. Try it for 90 days. Try the work. You can have your misery back.
Hello and welcome to 12 Steps and 12 Questions. My name is Silvio and I'm an addict. This pod is full of personal and inspirational stories of recovery from addiction. And in every episode I'll ask each guest the same 12 questions about their life, addiction and recovery. Quick warning, there will be some graphic descriptions and a healthy amount of swearing. For this episode, please welcome Danah.
Hi Danah, thank you so much for coming and being my guest today on 12 Steps and 12 Questions. Would you like to introduce yourself quickly?
Yes, thank you, Silvio. The pleasure is all mine. My name's Danah. I am 38 years old at present, and I'm from South London.
Great, excellent. Let's jump right into it. The first of our 12 questions is, did you have any adverse childhood experiences?
Oh, yeah, I did. Short answer. I can bring this one up fresh because I've spoken about it recently, and I spoke about it to my brother. On today's date, I have a brother who is about to turn 40 tomorrow. And him and I came 15 months after. So in 15 months, I will be 40, which is something I have to think about. Right. And I was speaking to him about an experience I had with our parents. My father, when I was very little. So that brother and I, we went to school together, and we're very, very close. I was always just the year below him. But when he was at nursery, when he was about 2, he was spending all day, and I would have spent a half day at nursery because I was very little. Mm-hmm. And on one of these half days, I was at home with our parents, and I remember Mum sitting on the sofa and dressing me, and my father was flailing his arms and had a raised voice. So they were in the midst of a row.
Yeah.
And then I remember my dad leaving the room, going to the kitchen. He returns with a cup. He hits my mother around about the face with it, striking her at sort of like the corner of her eyebrow. And I sort of remember being in distress. She starts to comfort me and says everything's going to be okay. But while she says that, that's when the blood starts gushing down from her face. And then she starts to cry. That's all I remember about that.
How old were you then?
I'll be about 18 months old.
Right.
Yeah. It's a very, unfortunately, one of my earliest memories. Thankfully, I have many, many beautiful memories, but yes, that's quite a clear moment in my history that I remember.
Amazingly, my very first memory, quite similarly, actually, is also one of my mother. Well, she wasn't hit, but she was crying, and she was continually crying around that time. I later understood that this was because my uncle had tried to commit suicide, and his life was in the balance in hospital, and those are my first memories of my mother crying, and that it always been drama, in the house in those first few weeks, I suppose, that I can remember. So I can really relate to that. Was this a regular occurrence?
Yes. Yes. Obviously, I'm so little, I can't attest to the exact frequency. But there was fighting, and I use that word. I've chosen that word correctly because it wasn't always that my mother was the victim of a violent attack. There was back and forth,
Right.
something going on. You know, I might add that a couple of days after that event I've just described, the next time I saw my dad, he had a limp and a bounded ankle. So Mum had avenged herself, right? So I mean, so there is that. But and I wasn't witness to that. But yeah, it happened. It did happen.
Tumultuous times right from the beginning.
Tumultuous times from the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah. I told Mum has the scar, still has a scar in her eyebrow from that event. And I recently in life, in the last few years, have reminded her that I was there at that. And she went, "Oh, I didn't know you were there at that. I remember you being there at this fight."
Right.
This other fight.
Yeah.
Because she remembers my reaction. And I was like, "Oh, right, you remember that one. I remember this one. Yay." Great.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that tells me that there was, it was something that happened.
Sure. Yeah. How did that continue?
Well, my stepdad has been in my life since I was 5 years old. So him and Mum have been together a very long time. So again, stuff that happened with my mum and my dad was in my very, very early years. Gosh, this would probably never happen again in life. But where my dad lived, to where we lived, he lived in the same building, right? So we were on the 4th floor. My dad was on the 7th floor. And in fact, that's how my parents met, because they lived in the same building.
Yeah.
And it was a sort of staggered building, and he could come to the end of like his level and look over a balcony and look down onto the 4th floor, so he could see his children playing around. And actually, oddly, my father introduced my mum to my stepfather, and so my dad was still around. We went to see him. He was very close by. And I mean, in hindsight, that must have been very tricky to negotiate for my mother, starting this new relationship and having her ex and the father of her children very, very, very close by.
Yeah.
But he was still, and I say fortunately, in our lives, we were, Mum never said a bad word about him, ever. Even today, it's quite difficult. I say more bad words about him than she does, and things like that. So she never sort of spoke negatively about it, and never gave us like information about her grievances with him. And I think it was really lucky that, because my stepfather is sort of the antithesis of him, of my father energetically. He's very passive, doesn't raise his voice, an absolutely non-violent man, and I get the choice and stuff like that. And so they did separate as a couple, but I still had my father very much in my life, and God only knows what Mum was doing under the, it looked like she was gliding, and I felt very loved and protected by her, and very much knew who my father was, felt very loved and protected by him. And I had a stepfather, great, and I had a very enjoyable childhood.
Yeah. So otherwise, apart from the tumultuous early times, you feel that you had a happy childhood.
I do. Yeah. I actually do. I'd say 0 to 10 were just some excellent years for me.
Wonderful. Now, that sort of segues quite nicely into question 2, which is, what did the moment you first got hooked, the fun times, what did that look like? So here you are, you said 0 to 10 was good period for you, was good time. Eventually, though, at some point, drugs or alcohol are introduced into your life. How did that come about?
Interesting. Great question. Wow, what a question to answer. So, My family are a big Rastafarian family, and Rastafarians are associated with cannabis. So that was in my life, my whole life.
So kind of born and bred into it in a way.
Oh yeah, absolutely. In fact, again, that same brother of mine, him and I talk about being proper Rasta babies, as in so my mum, her parents were, or her mother at least, it was deep Christian. Jamaica, where they're from, has more churches the most churches per square mile than anywhere in the world.
Wow.
Which is a little fun fact for you if you didn't know that. And a population of there you go, a population of just under 3 million people. So it's a lot of churches on a tiny island.
I originally hail from Italy, and of course I'd have bet money on Italy being the place that has the most churches per square mile. But there you have it. Okay, cool.
So there you have it, right? So my mother will have been born into a Christian faith, and then sort of converted to Rastafarianism in the late 70s when, it was the thing. Bob Marley's kicking off. It's just it, and she talks about that where she sort of gained validation for her identity. To have reggae being on the radio and people who the songs were sang in her mother tongue, right? She just felt seen in the world.
Sure. So for the very quickly, if you don't mind, just going out a little bit on a limb in terms of Rastafarianism.
Yeah.
For those of us who might not be also familiar with it, and that includes me, what's that about in a nutshell?
All right, nutshell. Rastafarians would like to call themselves, and my understanding of it, it's a way of life, right?
Yeah.
Like Buddhism, they don't like to call themselves a religion, and it's not an organised religion. It's a way of life. The word they use is livity.
Livity.
Yeah. And it's a sort of rereading of the Old Testament Bible and Amharic texts and Hebrew texts, and is a sort of like, hang on a minute, we are taught about a blue-eyed Jesus, and this dude was from Nazareth. What's the likelihood? And those kind of things. It challenges.
Yeah. The only guy in the Middle East, famously,
right. And there's even a description of him in some of the texts, which doesn't look like the sort of Catholic, perhaps, or Christian image.
100%.
So yeah, there is that. There is a sort of like, they share in that Muslim and and kosher eating from the same historic texts, and sort of covering of the hair and things like that.
So Rastafarian women would cover their hair?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
okay. So your mum covered her? My
mum did.
Right.
But however, she was quite open with me and didn't sort of force those things on me.
Yeah.
She's quite a little, she's got a rebel spirit, my mum. And so I wasn't too indoctrinated, but what me and my brother talk about is that my mum had to convert to Rastafarianism, and we were born straight into it.
Right.
So we didn't even have to even grapple with any of these two identities, and we actually feel really blessed with that, because even all the Bob Marleys of the world, like he would have even been, born into a Christian upbringing, right? And yet had to sort of forge their own identity, and we just knew who we were. Like, that's how my brother and I feel about it.
Yeah.
We were black and proud, where the cross section of like Black Power comes into Rastafarian. That's a major cross section.
Sure.
That. As Rastafarians sort of look to Marcus Garvey and Haile Selassie as sort of forefathers of of this way of life, of this liberty. In fact, emancipate yourself from mental slavery, which is a famous line in Bob Marley's Redemption song, is actually Marcus Garvey's quote. Is a famous Jamaican who essentially brought about Black Pride. He brought Black Pride to the Americas and brought Black Pride to the UK.
Right.
He was the first person saying "Be black and proud," and that was sort of early 1900s. So yeah, that is my take on Rastafarian. Is that there's factions now. There's Bob or Dreads and 12 Tribes of Israel, Rastafarianism, and there's the Garveyites, which is probably my faction.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So here we are. You know, you're in your what, 10, 11, 12, Danah in South London, born into this Rastafarian household background. Your father lives just opposite from you, more or less on the same block. You live with your father and your stepfather and your mum.
Yeah.
And you've had pretty much a good childhood after some tumultuous early times. Yeah. Right? It sounds lovely. It sounds great. You know, I love it. Yeah. What happened?
What happened? Where did it all go wrong? So I did have a confidence, sort of certainly an identity confidence, I would say, throughout my primary school life and education.
Right.
Again, that brother was there, a year older than me, so he was about. I'd say the first times things felt a bit weird for me is when David, my brother, went to secondary school. He went to a boys' school, and then I was going to go to secondary school the next year, and I went to a girls' school. That was the first time him and I were separate, and I didn't like that. And then when I did really well at this school, at my secondary school, I was a bright pupil, and I was in the top sets of a lot of things. And the girls who I became friendly with were a bunch of middle-class white girls. Mm-hmm. And I started to feel very, very different. I felt like the only one who had a stepdad and the only one who lived in a flat and the only black one. I was the only black one.
Right.
The only poor one. You know, everybody seemed to live in a house. Certainly the only Rastafarian one, right? And I had dreadlocks at that point as well. And I don't think, making this sweeping generalization, but I don't think when you're young, people, when they're young, you don't want to feel different.
I know I certainly didn't. I did, and I hated it.
Right. You don't want to feel different. Let's all be the same, please, when you're young.
And children can be cruel like that.
And children can be cruel. Differences in what's going to be pointed out. And I remember, so when I was about 16 and my best friend, she asked me when we got back in January from Christmas break at school, she asked me what I got for Christmas and I didn't get anything. And I remember lying and saying I got something that I had gotten earlier in the year. And I lied just simply because I wanted to fit in and I didn't want to explain that I didn't get anything and that we didn't have a tree and that we didn't have a place to go where we hung out with the rest of the family and all of that stuff. Although we had a great Christmas, Mum would always do a turkey. She's an excellent cook. I loved our food. And we'd enjoy the day. We'd watch Home Alone. Probably did loads of things really similarly to lots and lots of people. But I'd heard the girls' Christmases where they went to other parts of England, it seemed, because that's where they're from, right? That's where their families are from. And it's like, oh, we had to go here and then we had lunch at 2 and I had a cracker and then I got a gift from this and I have to buy presents and all of that wasn't happening. And so for a couple of years now, being with these friends for a couple of years, age 14, 15, now we were sort of in the last year of school, about 16, I didn't want to be different anymore and I told that lie. So that had started to feel different. And around the same age is when we started to get interested in boys and we started to get interested in clubbing. And again, me and this best friend, we brought in some of our old clothes to school that we didn't want anymore, sold them to our friends, and made £14 each. And that money was enough money to get us into Fabric nightclub. And we had enough money to we could get this fake ID, this student ID from Place of Victoria. So we did all that. We earned enough money to get this ID, which cost you about £5. And then you'd, get the ticket. And we both went to Fabric. And I mean, we weren't precocious at all. I think we pretty much held hands in Fabric and looked around and were very overwhelmed.
Wide-eyed
and saw like a really attractive man up there. Like, oh my God, he's fit. And like turned to each other and giggled at each other. Like it wasn't, we weren't I don't think we danced. I don't think we had the confidence to do that. But we were doing things that I guess, if we weren't from a particular part of the world, you're in South London, you could get a fake ID, you can get to a club. And then we also, like I say, we had this interest in boys. So we would go and find boys on the commons from other schools. And we were quite successful at that. We had a couple of very confident girls in our group. And they went over and just spoke to some boys on Streatham Common. And then we used to go and drink with these boys on the common. Lots of school kids do that in London. When I've just said this in chairs and things, and loads of people share back, oh my gosh, that's what we did. We found some boys and we all hung out. And again, if you look back at it, it was all so very innocent. Like most of the girls stayed in linked arms the whole night. We were drinking in groups by about 16. Okay. By about 15, 16, it was a regular occurrence to be drinking at least once a week.
Okay.
Yeah. And yes, even as early as that, and again, even in a linked arm, I still managed to find at the time I would have just thought they were the coolest people. But in hindsight, I can see that they were the ones that may have gone on to have issues with their drinking. The heavier drinkers, the harder drinkers, the harder partiers.
So here you are, you're wide-eyed, talking to boys in Fabric about Hello Kitty stickers. And you're having the occasional drink.
I'm having the occasional drink, yeah. And so now we've met boys, right? The boys seem to be a lot more curious about drugs, right? This film called... what's that film? The heroin film, Train Spotting.
Mm-hmm.
This film, Train Spotting, had come out, and that was all about like heroin use and what.
Yeah.
And the boys were really curious. I wasn't. It looked like a scummy world, and it didn't look like a world of my people. Again, my identity was quite firm. I'm a dreadlocked little Rasta girl. I know who I am.
Doesn't mix well with the sort of
it doesn't.
It's a Scottish white junkie world. Right, I get it.
Yeah.
Get it. Yeah.
I wanted no part of it really, and the boys were curious, so we helped the boys. I remember my first E actually. That was at a place called Rock and Pizza on Battersea Rise, and I had a friend I was really, really close to, a boy. And he was like, yeah, I want to try my first one. And I was like, I want to do whatever you're doing, essentially. And tried it. And we had a great time. I had a great time. My friend told me what it's going to be like. That was a girl, actually. She was like, you're just going to start feeling the tunes, basically. And that's exactly what happened. Everything felt a bit glowy and I was feeling the tunes. It was enjoyable.
That was the first time you took any drug? Apart from alcohol?
Yeah. No. Yeah. I can't work out. So I remember my first line of cocaine. This is all about 17, 18. And it wasn't long after that it was a regular occurrence or an every time we were out occurrence.
Yeah.
We were out every weekend without fail.
Now, when you did your first E and also your first lines and that sort of thing, was that something that stuck with you right away? Because my first E, for instance, was a sort of, I've often talked about this, as a semi-religious, quasi-religious experience, right? Where for me, it turned me from, it was like a super drug. It turned me from being quite within myself. I always appeared confident, right? I'm an extrovert, so I do a lot of talking and all that. Doesn't mean you feel confident inside, of course, right? And so it turned me from feeling uncomfortable really in my skin quite often and always less than, right? Because I come from this immigrant background and all the rest of it. And I was an Italian growing up in Germany. Everybody's taller and blonder and whatnot, and so on, and richer, obviously, and all that. And it turns me from being that guy into the amazing Silvio, right? That was my experience. All of a sudden, I'm more confident. I'm like, oh, cool. I'm all these things, right? And inside, I feel that my insecurities had vanished, and I'm so optimistic about everything. I'm just so positive. So positive about everything. It'll all work out. When really, deep down, I'm just really scared. Usually, most of the time in those days, and so on. And did you have anything similar like that when you had your first experiences with drugs, or did that come at a later date, perhaps, or not at all?
So, the feelings now, like I wanted to hug everyone when I first took my first E. I felt yummy and warm. But actually, for me, 17, 18, I was the shit. I was really popular at school. And I had a boyfriend. I had my first boyfriend who was absolutely gorgeous. And, I was in the cool gang.
Now, here you are. You're part of the cool crew. You got a boyfriend. And then how did it go from there? How did that progress? And when did you maybe first start to see that it would become a problem?
I remember a friend of mine from school. She was coming to Mr. Y's party and she said, I've still got 0.5 gram left from X's party last week that I shared with 3 of our girls from school. And I was like, excuse me, you've got half of what left? How come you have anything left?
Yeah.
Because I know that. And then so at that point I was like, she bought 1 gram with 4 of them last week. And has half left this week. I bought 2 grams for myself, and the boys bought 2 grams each for themselves, and we don't have any left. And we're looking to buy that again tonight for this new party. And the same girl, she says to me, Danah, I think you're doing it too much. I think you're doing it too much.
Right.
Too much coke now. And the feeling I had towards her, I was just like, how dare you? How dare you? And that was the beginning of the end of those friendships. I slowly...
Was there just one person who came up to you, or were there others?
It was this particular person. However, she represented the group. She was bringing me the group consensus.
Right. Like
she was
group conscience.
She was bringing me the group conscience because they were missing me. My girlfriends from school were missing me. I had started to hang out with the boys. I have a turning point story actually.
Would this be perhaps for question 3?
Oh gosh.
That we can come right to now, which is that what were your worst consequences and finally your rock bottom?
If you're enjoying this podcast and would like other addicts and alcoholics to hear it, then please make the pesky AIs and algorithms work their 12th step. Hit like and subscribe.
I would say this is. It is. And it's absolutely a turning point. So I've got this best mate. He's a boy. He is a very popular boy and he's unabashedly into drugs, this boy. He smoked weed since he was 13 and was selling weed to the sixth formers at his school. He went to a posh school and he was like, literally selling weed to the boys who were 17 and 18 at his school. Weed wasn't so much my drug. I'd come from a Rastafarian family, so it wasn't delinquent enough for me to be interested in it. It wasn't naughty. I could have got a spliff from my mum if I wanted to.
Yeah. This is really interesting, of course.
Right.
It's good. It's something I was going to ask.
Oh,
which is
right.
that you're literally born into a culture that condones, I suppose,
Absolutely.
smoking weed. So
absolutely. As much as my mum wouldn't have necessarily wanted me at 15, like inhaling toxins into my lungs, if I turned around to her and was like, Mum, I'm smoking weed, she would have been fine, because I've seen her do it with my other siblings.
Yeah.
So yeah, when my friends were doing it, and again, it was the boys, 15, that was the first drug for a lot of them. The illicit first drug was absolutely cannabis, and I was not interested in it. They were really, to be really deep into the common, right in the bushes where the dog poo was, and wasn't very, and the condoms were from all the, cottaging or dogging or whatever it's called. And
different podcast, that one.
Yeah. I could be back for that one. But this guy I was hanging out with when I was about 18, very regularly, not hang out with my girlfriends anymore. All at the same parties, but the girls would get together and get ready together for the party. But I was just hanging out with him so we could use before the party, during, after, and have our own nice party.
Is this turning point that you went?
This is the turning point. So he had a girlfriend and I had a boyfriend. And his girlfriend got really upset. And I knew his girlfriend, right? She was at our school with us and stuff. She started to say to him, Danah's like your girlfriend who you don't fuck. You have to choose between her and I. What did the idiot say? He went to her, well, I choose Danah because Danah would never make me choose. So so I've been at his house all night and I've woken up in the day and he's like, oh God, I've got to go and meet my girlfriend. I was like, please go and meet her. I don't want her and I to fall out. And it's about a 10-minute walk to hers from his. And he's back in 20 minutes. And he goes, and I go, so what happened? He goes, well, she told me to choose and I've chosen you. Great, now I'm going to fall out of her. But I go to my boyfriend's house and he's got a lovely house that is, when he had a free house, he threw me a birthday party and everything. It was great. And we have a little bit, me and this guy go to my boyfriend's house and him and I, me and the guy, what should I call him? I will call him James. So I'll call him James.
Okay.
Me and James go to my boyfriend's house and we all have a little bit of coke. And I want a little bit more. We've gone out. So about to call it on. And my boyfriend goes like, well, what are you doing? Like, let's just go to bed. It's 1 o'clock in the morning. And I go, no, sorry, I'm going with James. We're leaving to go get some more. And I pretty much lost my boyfriend at that.
Right. Okay.
James had, fobbed off his girlfriend for me, and I had. It was now.
Yeah.
The gift.
So
it was the drugs.
You, as well as James, chose drugs over your respective partners.
Exactly.
Right. And that is a turning point.
That is a turning point.
Yeah.
I would say, from then and even that point, we weren't going to many parties anymore. Me and James just wanted happy to hang out with a few choice people who we can all see now in hindsight are the ones that wanted to use.
Yeah. Did you at this point, so in your early 20s, you're using quite a bit, did you have any awareness around the fact that this has turned a bit problematic, or that this is sort of ruling your life or starting to rule your life, or that, its influence on you is growing, perhaps to a point which is uncomfortable?
I did. But it was not as black and white as all that.
No.
The using got quite regular. And now we're about 21. And I remember it was the first time I said to James, I'm going to stop. I've just got to. And I don't know. I obviously just wanted more money in my pocket. And we weren't going out anymore. I remember protesting, going, we're just in your room all the time, James. Like this is rubbish. I want to go out and party. I want to see other faces. We had this small crew of about 5 or 6 of us, and it was always us. And I just started hanging out with other people. Those other people soon became using friends anyway. It's like I start hanging out with people who didn't drink or didn't do anything. It's weird that I just thought it was because I was with this crew, James and co, we were doing all that, and it wasn't. It was now me, and I started to notice that by hanging out with other people. So, but that was at 21. I tried to stop. That was my first time.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And so you're crew jumping.
Yeah.
Right. And wherever you go, drugs are following you. So clearly it's not the crews. Clearly it's you.
Right. I didn't put 2 and 2 together. I just still thought it was, staying up too late was the issue. Like maybe it's just it's just because it's fine to do all the drugs, but it's just like I need to get to bed at midnight because I've got work in the morning and it's annoying going to work, hang in and all of that stuff. So I tried doing those kinds of things. They never worked. Just going to bed a bit earlier, but it never worked. I said, all right, I'm just going to do 0.5 gram because that's cheaper. I should get to bed earlier, but it never worked. So I did.
So you do your 0.5 gram and then you kind of go, I might as well do.
I might as well do the other half, and or before I know it, I've done it.
Yeah.
Oh, mate, I was meant to. Is that mine? Is it finished? Whoa, okay, let me just get some more. Before I knew it, but I had started to try and curb and manage and control with absolutely no success. If you'd have asked me though at that time to comprehensively, say what was going on for me, I don't think I'd have said, drugs are a problem. I'd have said, I stay up a bit late, and I like to party. I like to, and actually the raves are getting expensive. They used to be £10 a ticket. Now there's 35 quid a ticket. Yeah, that's what I would have said.
So you didn't think of yourself as having a drug problem?
Oh, absolutely not.
Right. Okay.
Absolutely not. And I didn't think drugs were a problem. The drugs I was doing was cocaine, which was posh. Where I was doing it was posh in very well-to-do people's houses. Remember, I felt like the poor one. So these people were better than me already. Yeah. I decided. And everything that they were doing wasn't wrong. We were doing cocaine. We weren't, this is what posh people do. This is what classy people do. It's what wealthy people do.
Yeah.
So you couldn't even have told me drugs were a problem.
I mean, how wrong that all is, in that whole thinking, that whole mindset is mind-blowing.
Mind-blowing mindset. And completely, and not even, when have I made that up? Like very early on, I was sort of 16 years old, particularly as that girl, that big sister of my friend who gave me my first line, she, to me, that girl and her sister were so perfect in my eyes. They were the idyllic family, so middle, the whole situation was so middle class. That beautiful house I did my first line in, these beautiful, well-to-do people, daughters of a doctor, who did it. I couldn't have associated drugs being a problem at all.
Yeah, it's away from the sort of manky common, with all people, 12 people standing around being sharing a spliff, or or the Scottish smackheads up somewhere in Scotland shooting up. Yeah, no, I get it. Yeah, but eventually it became a problem. And when did you really notice that it did?
So this is late 20s.
So you've been using more or less on that level all that time?
I've been using more or less on that level all that time.
Yeah.
And I'm established. I know I kind of know what I like now.
Yeah.
I know that I like to get to my first couple of drinks is lager. Couple of them in, I like to call on the packet. Once the packet's arrived, I like a cigarette and a tequila and a few hard drinks. And then when we get back to the house, I like a spirit and mixer. And those house pours, those at-home pours, which look like crazy. Right?
Yeah.
And I feel quite nice about that, actually. I feel like...
We like routine as addicts, don't we? We really do. It doesn't matter what it is, whether, it's the way you roll your spliff or, the way you sort of, this has to be poured this way and not that way. And I was super peculiar about this thing as well. Yeah.
So, I started to try and look for I wanted to become an electrician, and I got into that trade and started to try and look to have a career and things like that. And that was not working with a cocaine habit. It just was impossible. And then I'd hang around with my weed friends, and then I'd hang around my booze friends in those times. I might even get a little boyfriend, and we'd shack up for a couple of months, because my boyfriends, I tried to make sure that they weren't cokeheads, but they'd be big old potheads or something. Yeah. But this was fine, because that was allowed, remember. I'm a little Rasta baby. I'm not doing drugs if I'm just smoking weed with my boyfriend, and I feel it's like I can kind of wake up and get to work. I can, but I'd find my way back into some coke field. But I mean, you've asked me about, did you think you had a drug problem? Were drugs a problem? No, I didn't think drugs were a problem. But weed, I didn't know weed was a drug until I came into recovery. And now I'm now I'm actually at 30. This was another turning point for me. 30 was 29 going into 30. I'd started to make friends with my brother again, who absolutely does not have this allergy we have.
Right, okay.
He can have a drink and stop at a drink. Wow. He can have 2 drinks and go, oh yeah, I'm all right now. You know? He used to smoke weed a little bit when he was 16, and then didn't, because he loved his football so much. He was just like, no, I prefer to do that and not be stoned for it. Yeah. So that's what
normal people decisions.
Normal people decisions, right? And so he would have been 30 if I was 29, and I was starting to feel black again. Now, this is some other cross section of my using that you know is quite interesting to me, because I go to the odd people of colour AA meeting now, and we unabashedly talk about the cross sections of like sort of racism and using and how that affected our own using paths, but without being able to put that actual vocabulary on it in real time. At the time, I'm a bit bored of what I perceive as my white friends getting me involved in their white people drugs, and I'm off track now because I was trying to keep up with the white Joneses, and I want to be black and Rastafarian again, and actually that's my true identity, and let me get back to that. So I'm smoking weed, and I am going back to college, and I'm doing my thing.
How did you find yourself at an AA meeting, though?
I was blessed by God, another blessing by God. So I was on my last friend, right? I was on my last friend about 4 years ago. So again, like I said about the girls in my early 20s, the girls from school saying, I think you're using a bit too much, and me just feeling too disgusting to accept love. These my own. I didn't know I felt disgusting. I thought I was the shit, and I was. People were validating me, but didn't accept any love, and sort of stopped hanging out with them. I lost my boyfriend, who's my only boyfriend. I haven't had a proper boyfriend since. It's all been some using guy and whatever else. So no boyfriends, no real like affection in that way. Got rid of any friends that cared about me. All the friends I had were using friends for a good 15 sort of 17 years, and I was on my last friend. She and I used together, and she went on a Tinder date, and this Tinder date said to her, she sort of said to him like, oh, what you doing later? And he goes, oh, I'm going to a meeting, you can come if you want. And she's like, sure. So she went to an AA meeting with him. And
wow, Tinder is actually good for something.
Tinder's good for something, yeah. And then I think they went on another date and took her to he said, I think you might need an AA meeting. She went, and then she sent him a barrage of text messages. How dare you judge me? I don't have a problem with drinking. If you do, sod you. And then, so the next time her and I hung out, she said to me, "Oh, I'm doing AA." I was like, "What's that?" She's like, "Oh, you got to go to these meetings." So she took me to a meeting. It was in a church in Islington. And
why would she take you to a meeting after telling him lost?
So for some reason, again, her higher power must have told her to keep going. Actually, as well, she was trying to appease her mother. So her father was an addict.
Right, okay, so that's why she
died with a needle in it. So she was trying to appease her mother and saying, "Oh, I'm going to AA." So yeah, so she casually, I mean, we've literally come from the pub, and we met to go to the pub, and she says, "Just before I need to go to a meeting, I've told my mum I'm in AA. I go to this meeting." And I'm like, "Oh, wow, it felt really lovely." Some really hot man gave me a custard cream and a cup of tea. I sat down, we did some readings. And remember, I've got a sort of pseudo-Christian upbringing, right? My mum taught me to pray. She was taught to pray. I know Bible scripture because reggae is all Bible scripture over reggae music. It felt really great to hear a bit of like sort of God speak, a bit of addict speak, and in a sort of nice place. But we went straight from that meeting to the pub, and that's what we did for about 6 months. I didn't have anybody else in my life. She was my last friend. Then, so this would have been like September, October. And in March 2020, for some reason, it had clicked for her and she wanted to do it seriously. She'd been knocking about the rooms for about 6 months. Something had clicked for her. I do know the story now of what had clicked for her, but at that time I didn't. And we went into lockdown, and her and I were our own bubble in lockdown. So I was sort of living with her in this new place she lived in. She was sober, and I'd just been given a bag of Valium pills, right? And I was really happy for her. So I wasn't drinking with her, but I was secretly just popping a Valium every night, and that was great. I couldn't believe I'd found Valium so late in my using. I was like, "Oh my God, this is the drug I really like. Sort all those uppers. I'm into this." And yeah, something clicked for her, and then she did it. She was going for about a year. She started to look really good. I had this bag of gear on me, and MDMA was never her drug. I loved it. And I was just waiting for this day when she'd finally go, "Oh, go on, Danah, give us a line." I'd be like, "Hallelujah." And I was carrying it around me. I was carrying it into meetings. And a few meetings would even say something in the prayer, "Please don't bring drugs in here. And if you've drank today, please don't share back." And I had drank sometimes, and I had used Valium, and I had smoked weed. And I was going to these rooms, and I was sitting at the back. She was sharing. I was crying because sometimes I'd hear my story. But I'd go back out and I'd use, and I was trying to rebuild some other friends around but it wasn't the same. These gear people, I didn't really like using with them. They were annoying to me. They were, they didn't even use as much as I did. I was like, "Oh, boring, yawn, I was insulted by the size of the lines they were giving me. I just wanted it all to hurry up. These were proper gearheads. I wanted James back. I wanted like those nutters back who would like hard get at it. And I was just using what I called like eye-rolly, flimsy users, right? And I just wanted her back. My God, she was my equal. Like we could, she'd pull me, she'd sort me out a good line.
She's a proper using friend.
Proper using man. And then she started to look good. And one night, I'd invited her out. I was like, "Come on, I've orchestrated it now. She'd love to come out for this." And she went, "No, I'm meeting Melissa in the morning for coffee." And not only that, she did go and meet Melissa in the morning for coffee. I've seen her tell me she's going to go to work the next day and be in my flat, sprawled out, going, "What's happened?" Like, and she did. Her life started to get great. Fellowship was building up around her. She started to look good, and I was not. And but I was hanging out with her a lot and going to these meetings.
Yeah, okay. So you were kind of in and out then.
I was in and out.
Yeah.
What
wondering a little bit here is that before I came into the rooms, my using had got so bad that I was getting a lot of aggro from the people around me. Yeah. But I was suffering, man. I was in pain. I was in pain because I would go on these benders. I never meant to go on a bender, really. We hear this all the time, don't we? I'd go out and I'd just go, I have a couple of lines, or, we'll have just a few beers, or it's not going to be so bad this time, or whatever. And invariably, I'd end up, sometimes it'd be 24 hours, sometimes it'd be 48, sometimes more, and invariably I'd end up and I would have used, I don't know how many bags, and I'd be literally on my bathroom floor, looking for bits of gear, rubbing them into my gums, drinking rum from the bottle to calm me down, and trying to have dealers deliver at 4 a.m. Eventually I'd give up and my body would give in, and did you have similar experiences like
100%. So if you looked at me, I was so depressed. My flat looked like shit. It was a crack house. It had like a weird chair, not a rug and anything. That's why I was quite happy to be anywhere but there. So I'd be at her flat, this friend who just like, because it was nice, had furniture. She had food. I didn't have food. I didn't have furniture. When I was at home, it was awful. I was so depressed. Curtains drawn. The places that had curtains up, which was just in my bedroom. I spent a lot of time in there, in bits, crying, watching loads and loads of Judge Judy, but just smoking myself, like smoking on my own, smoking weed on my own, sorry. And just watching Judge Judy and EastEnders. I was living, I wasn't in touch with my family, really. I wasn't at all. And I didn't have any friends. It was pretty bleak.
It sounds pretty bleak. And not just because of the cultural choices you made with EastEnders, but also just, if you're thinking about it, it sounds like proper isolation.
It was
depression.
Wild isolation.
And sadness.
Like real sad. I won't have a bad word said about Judge Judy. I will, but yes, EastEnders, surely. But no, I mean, deep isolation. This is years of it.
Yeah.
I'm on it.
And around that time, I mean, surely by this point, the idea of being an addict must have come upon you.
I did. There was some correlation between me saying, right, I'm not going to use this much, or I'm only going to smoke this much, and never being able to keep that. Yeah. And never being able to keep that promise. But I don't know. I would have danced around those drug addict and me. I didn't ever. I can't be a drug addict. I'm smoking weed, people. Weed is not a drug. A drug addict doesn't have a home. They've lived on the street. They foam at the mouth. They ask for money. That's not what I'm doing. And now, don't get me wrong, my home was just, it had walls. I'm sure actually the people who've asked for money on the street had a home very similar.
Probably,
actually,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I did ask for money. I would tell people that I had bills to pay, and they would help me with those bills. I had this friend who's an older man. I used to work for him. And I'd tell him I had those bills, and I did have the bills. I was in rent arrears. But he'd give me the money for my rent, and it wouldn't go there. It would first go on the weed and things I needed. I didn't use hard drugs on my own. So that was another delusion, that I didn't use cocaine on my own. I didn't use ease on my own. So I always blamed other people for when I was using those drugs. So it was those people get me into their shit, And
most of the time, you'd be alone at home, smoking weed, watching EastEnders, watching Judge Judy, feeling sad, feeling depressed, feeling lonely. And then eventually you'd get out, you'd meet friends, using friends, you'd use, have a use up, come back home, and then the next day kind of go, oh, it's their fault.
Oh, absolutely. That was it. That was the narrative for years. Good 3-4 years. That was it. Oh, now look, I'm broke because I spent that money on coke. I wouldn't have been able to use coke if I didn't go out with them. That's their fault. And they never seemed like drug addicts to me because they had jobs that they were holding down. They were middle class. And I told myself many, many years before this that they were better than me. So even they weren't drug addicts. But when we used drugs, it was their fault that I had been broke. Weed was not a drug. That was the drug I used on my own. So no. So, it's just a self-delusion. Yeah. I can hear it all now.
And then in the end, though, those consequences and everything must have piled up to a degree that you then came into recovery. So what was that like?
So that was like, so this friend, she done a sort of beautiful 12-step, and I don't think she knew she was doing it. I bet she probably claimed she knew. She did not know. So we're talking about recovery to each other, and she said, and I say to her, I don't think I've got a problem. You know, I smoke a bit of weed, and she was like, yeah, but don't you have that hole in the soul? I went, no, great, I'm fabulous. Me dining out on some feelings I had, or this person of 17 or 16 years ago who was a bit fabulous. Cool. The reality was I was not fabulous. I did not feel good. And she was like, well, I had the hole in the soul. I felt I was drinking to feel that. I was definitely an alcoholic. I was like, okay. And I'm thinking, if she's so this is the first time I've gone, if she is talking about the way she drank as an alcoholic, then I must be, because I drank the same. But still, my last bit of self-delusion, I just went, yeah, maybe it's not for me though. Then she went to me, it's not for everyone. Maybe it's not. I think something in her had given up. She said, it's not for everyone. That was it. I went, excuse me? In my head. Like, excuse me? It's not for everyone. Like you're having something I want to have. And my competitive / I don't want someone to have something that I don't.
Envy.
I was like, right, I'll show you. I'll be the best AAA you've ever seen. And then I had this incredible God moment that my mind. So at the point of her saying, this isn't for everyone, I'd been in the rooms, I'd been following her into the rooms for about a year. So I had a job. I was working in construction and I had my work boots, right? And my work boots were Dr. Martens steel toe caps work boots. But I had taken them to a leather worker, right? And I had them like the ankle bit of the Dr. Martens. I had them cut down. He cut them down to the low ankle so that they were like a low ankle, and he'd restitch them. So they were one of a kind DMs. Yeah, I'd had to hire a car, a zip car to do this job, and I'd hired this zip car, and I'd picked it up from where I lived, and I'd left these boots in the car. So I was like, oh my goodness, I don't know how I'm going to get the boots back. But being a lazy addict, I'd left it a while. I'd left it a week. So this friend of mine, the one in the rooms, told me it's not for me and it's not for everybody. She'd invited me to a meeting, which was quite usual now. I'd been going to like a couple of weeks with her for about a year. In this meeting, there's this young woman, and she comes in and she's got some steel toe cap Dr. Martens with a shorter, the ankle bit is cut down, and the laces in it, they look really similar to the ones I'd lost a week before. She comes and she sits next to me in the meeting. And at this point, that girl who had said to me, this best mate, I've got to give her a name, haven't I? Let's call her Tessa. Tessa had said to me, the program might not be for you, it might not be for everyone. She sat at the opposite side of the meeting, and this girl with these boots that look really similar to mine have come and sat next to me. It's a minute before the meeting's about to start. So I look at her and I go, where'd you get your boots? And she went, you'll never believe it. I found them in Stockwell.
If you're enjoying this podcast and would like other addicts and alcoholics to hear it, then please make the pesky AIs and algorithms work their 12th step. Hit like and subscribe.
And the meeting starts. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the AA meeting of... And I'm like, Stockwell, that's where I dropped the car off. That's where I live.
They're your shoes.
Go through the whole thing. They're my shoes.
Wow.
They're my shoes. We go through the whole meeting. She says, I was walking past these boots in Stockwell. I saw them and I was like, oh my God, I love them. But somebody had left them there. They're somebody's boots. So she said she walked past them every day for a week for work. And she went, do you know what? I'm taking these boots, man. They fit me like a glove. They're meant to be for me. And she finally took the boots. She decided to wear them that day to the meeting. And I went, those boots are mine. I left them in the zip car. She was like, oh yeah, they're in front of a zip car. And I said to her, and I was like, if God was trying to show me I was in the right place, the chair...
He would use Dr. Martin boots.
It used Dr. Martin boots. And I was like, I'm meant to be here. The chair had done this great chair, and I asked that chair to be my sponsor. And I told the girl, I was like, you can have them. And she was like, no, please. She gave me my boots back.
That's so AA though, isn't it?
So, yeah.
Sorry. No, I couldn't possibly.
Now, even funnier with that story, that day, Tessa had told this girl to come to the meeting. She said, just come to this meeting. I know you've been struggling. That girl could have sat next to Tessa, who was sat at the other side of that's the person she knew in the meeting, right?
Yeah.
But she didn't.
No.
She came in, she sat next to me. She couldn't have been any closer. There was the closest chair to me.
Wow. Amazing. Ever so slightly going one step back, just before you came into the rooms, and our question 4 is, did you ever want to die? Did you consider suicide?
Whoa. That was daily. That was daily. For
how long?
Oh, it was daily, I'd say, for 3 years. I'd say age 30 or 3, 4, 5 years.
Right, it's a long time.
Long time.
It's a long time to feel suicidal.
Yeah.
How would that manifest?
Right, so I would absolutely think of the ways I could do it. There was the older gentleman I said who I worked for. He lived around the corner. He lives around the corner from me. He still does. And he would help me about every 6 months with my rent there. And some of the money he'd lend me would go on rent, and some of it. So I was just scraping by with the rent arrears. And
yeah,
I'd go to him. He had children my age, and I'd go to him and say things like, I just really need to get away. But I want to go by the sea, and I want to put some weights on my legs and walk out into there and never come up, and garner real sympathy from him, and then do that. And I'd get a wad of cash in my hand that'd keep me ticking over for a bit. And then I'd spend a few months in my room on my own. And when somebody invited me out, Tessa say, I'd put on the show, Danah the showgirl.
Yeah.
And it is painful to talk about. I'm not going to lie. There's a lump in my throat as I speak about this. I'm so sad for that girl. I know she makes it out, and I know how the story ends, but or a new story begins, should I say?
Yes.
It was very dark. It was very bleak, and I would pray. Essentially, yeah, I was asking something out there to not wake up. That's how I wanted to do it, because I didn't want to upset and disturb my family. And I was thinking, right, so how long will it take for them to find my body? About 5 days. I'd be pretty decomposed by then, because I gave myself that amount of time, because that was about the regularity I was in. Anybody who cared about me's life. So it wouldn't be totally unheard of for you to get in touch with me, just to say how I'm doing perhaps, and for me to take maybe a day or so to reply. So I worked out that I was about 5 days from it being concerning before a couple of people in my life gone, oh, I haven't heard from Danah, or I haven't heard from Danah. Actually, let's knock. So that's how few people were regularly in my life. And so then I just thought about my mum finding me decomposed. Now, oddly and ironically, my mum finding me dead was something that had followed me all the way through my using, right? When I was high on coke, I used to really worry about dying on coke, not for dying on coke's sake, but for my mum finding me and them doing the toxicology report and her finding out that I'd done cocaine. So that's that. So I was like, I cannot die when I'm using.
That's a really weird but understandable paranoia to have. Oh, yeah, I get it.
That's what. So I didn't care about my life for my sake. I didn't want my mum couldn't find me dead on coke. So now I'm smoking largely weed. I was like, that's fine, but I didn't want her to find me decomposed. So days would go by me just wanting to not wake up. And yeah, I genuinely would pray for that.
Yeah.
It's fascinating how long you can be in that, in the dark.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah. It's very sad.
It's very sad.
Very sad, yeah.
It's very sad. Again, those people who knew me in my early 20s and 70s, if anybody knows me early life, they'll be sad to hear this.
Yeah, and I think, it's also because by your very nature, you're quite up and sparkly and talkative and all those things. And, when that light sort of almost goes out, then it's a very sad thing to happen. Yeah. Number 5 of our questions is, what other methods did you try to get sober before finding the brooms? Did you try anything apart from the fact that you've already said that you tried to moderate, which I also tried to do very, very unsuccessfully?
Yeah. No, you see, I couldn't afford a geographical, so I didn't do that. I would have, though. I'd have loved to have left the country. And I probably just wasn't brave enough to have left the country, but I didn't. I did geographical by isolation. No, isolation and changing of groups was my technique. And then going to weed, because you got to remember, I thought weed wasn't a drug.
Yeah.
So I was not using.
Yeah. For all intents and purposes.
For all intents and purposes, I was not using during those times.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
So you are sober.
I am sober, yeah. I'm sober.
And a week off.
Yeah.
What's not like, yeah. No, I get it, absolutely. So here you are, you've come into the rooms, and our question 6 is, did you struggle with the word God?
Thankfully, no. No struggle. Combination of things. We were always taught to pray. I know the Lord's Prayer, which is the Our Father, which art in heaven prayer, and I know Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd. Psalm 23 happens to be my favourite sort of bit of text in the world. I absolutely love it. It gives me strength, and it gives me strength because I was taught to do, those were the 2 prayers we had to do before bed. My mum bringing her Christian upbringing into our upbringing, even though she raised us as Rastas, as a Rasta herself. Rastafarianism isn't far from the Bible, though, anyway. It really isn't. It's lots of scripture over reggae and all that. So I knew those prayers. I didn't do them past, age 15 or whatever. I did them every night then, though, when I was a girl. I was an obedient girl. Now, when you're raised in a black family, matriarchal, strong black woman family, you're very obedient. I was. So the notion of this sort of sponsor guiding me through something and being obedient to somebody telling you something they know about was really easy for me.
Oh, great.
It is a transferable skill from having quite a sort of strict, authoritative upbringing. Hallelujah. My God. So we, in Rastafarianism, we call God Jah, but a higher power, a God, and even the gendered God with the sort of hymn stuff wasn't a problem for me.
Wow, isn't that amazing?
Lucky, a little, just a transferable bit, relief.
Yeah. It's interesting, especially for me as someone who came in, how brilliant this is for you, I guess, and for everybody who comes in who doesn't struggle with the word God. That you were spared all the skepticism, trials and tribulations that I went through before I could find anything that I could really believe in,
Gosh.
Coming from that sort of thinky, secular, God rejecting, that's for people who don't ask questions kind of background, do you know what I mean? So, wow, amazing. Question 7 is, how do you experience your higher power today?
Wow, love this question. Right, so I use this phrase, being in flow, when I'm really experiencing higher power.
Yes.
What I mean about it is I can see how all the parts of my life, just to get through a day. All right, I'll use today as an example so that I'm not speaking too much in the abstract and people can get it.
Just before you do that,
okay,
for the benefit of the listener, I love the movement.
Oh, did
it looked like you were doing Tai Chi or something. Very flowy sort of arm movements. Wonderful.
Yeah. So
brilliant.
That's how I feel.
Yeah.
Right.
Literally in flow. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I've been having this thing that's been happening, and what's been happening in the mornings is when I go to work in the mornings, I leave at some time before 7. I haven't been very rigid with that. I usually am, but I haven't been, for some reason in my life lately, been very rigid with that. It just has to be at some time before 7. So sometime between 7:15 and 7:05. And the bus stop is right outside my flat, and I can see it from the windows in my flat. I can see the bus stop. And I leave, and I try to leave by thinking of God and my higher power in my life. And what's been happening is as soon as I get to the bus stop, I look to my right and my bus is coming. It's happened every day for the last 3 weeks. I'm telling you, this is and my bus is coming, and I haven't left at the same time. It's not because I'm leaving at the same time. So I've been saying to myself, this is what I've been saying. I was like, I don't know about your higher power. I don't know who I'm talking to, some other human in my head. But I'm going, I don't know about your higher power, but my higher power loves me. And the bus comes. And I sit on and I smile at the bus driver. And this flow thing is happening where I know that I'm guided. I know that I'm chosen. I know that I'm protected. And I actually have less and less of a descriptive way to describe higher power than I did coming into the rooms. I knew exactly who God was coming into the rooms. He was a he, for starters, and he was a Santa Clausy looking dude. Randomly was still white, even though all of that Rastafarian upbringing about Black Jesus-y stuff that I was growing up with. And he was punishing me because I was not doing his stuff, right? I was using drugs, which you're not meant to do if you're God fearing, and I was not even a good girl to my parents. I didn't even honor my mother and father, like it says in scripture. I wasn't doing the things God wanted me to do. Therefore, that's why I was sad, and I deserved to be sad, and God was punitive. But now God is all things good, and God is all things love, and God is all things true. And the thing about truth and the thing about love is that they don't belong to people. They don't belong to you. Only you get love, and only you get love, and you get love when you're doing the right thing. I'm living proof that God is love, and God's love is unconditional. Because if it were conditional, I wouldn't qualify for it, and yet I do. My bus comes. I'm presented with an opportunity to help somebody as soon as I need one, to get out of my own blinking bonkers head of undeserving or wanting a husband and a baby and things that I think I need to have to be okay. and yet I am okay.
Yeah.
Even though I don't have them, and I can't even see what's in front of me, that I am actually okay. That home that looks like a crack home now, I'm going to work, I'm able to work. I get to go to work. It's not something I have to do. It's something I get to do. If I change the language around that, of course, I've got to pay my bills, but I'm capable of doing it. There was a time where I wasn't capable working. I was so fogged in the brain with the drugs I was using. I didn't want to leave my flat. I didn't want to be out of it. And it wasn't a nice place to be. It was like a mattress on the floor, weird bit of secondhand furniture, flat. And yet it was scarier to be outside there and be seen. I didn't want to be seen by people, by the world. And so that is how I experienced God. I experienced God in like, wow, my 2 legs, my physical 2 legs that I have slagged off for a lifetime for being too fat, especially too big amongst the thin middle-class white girls that seemed so tiny. They always seem so bloody tiny, these girls I hang out with. Sadly,
quite a large part of them have food issues, surely.
Totally. Which with your own, and my understanding now of self-centered is so different. You know, I thought I was so giving of myself and not self-centered at all. But I was so self-centered, all I could think about was my thighs are fatter than hers, and yet I didn't see the trouble that this person felt at all, and totally had food issues. My best friend, that one who all the boys liked, she would drink Diet Coke at lunchtime, and that's all she'd have all day, and was really grouchy just to maintain. So I didn't see that, but she was just thin, and so her life was brilliant. I experienced in God in all my abilities, of which there are plenty.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Question 8. Which parts of the steps were the most difficult for you?
You know, oddly, it's actually 6 and 7. 6 was entirely ready to have God remove all my defects of character. 7, humbly asked God to remove my shortcomings. I have seldom been entirely ready to have God remove my defects of character. I have had quite courage in a few of my convictions, right? In some of the things that I'm right about that. I'm right about the disparities that a patriarchal and capitalist society. I'm correct about that. Straight white men, let's add middle class into that, have an easier walk through life than I do. That's what I think I'm right on that. There are some of the qualifiers or quantifiers that I might put to that argument, I'm actually not altogether wrong about, right? So when I get some thoughts like that in my mind, I'm not entirely ready to have God remove all of my defects of character.
So would that, you mean the fact that you're opinionated? Is that what you mean by that?
Yeah, I think the fact that I have some opinions and thoughts about life that are somewhat provable. Is provable a word? It is now. It is something that blocks me from the sunlight of the Spirit. Yeah. It is something that interferes with God, because I am in that moment not giving God all the power. And it contradicts with something I feel about God, because I do know and believe that God is all powerful. But I'm holding on to something there. I have been removed of my obsession to use safely. I know that I cannot use safely. You know, it's not to say that doesn't mean that it's not that I'm saying, oh, I think a line of cocaine would kill me. That's not what I mean. I mean, I know it would not stop there.
Mm.
There's no one line for Danah. There's no one drink for Danah. If after one drink, there'd be more, and there would be suicidal ideation. There would be the self-loathing. There would be the literal isolation. There would be the dark corners of, that's what it'd be. I know that. God has removed that because I fully trust God with drugs. I fully trust God with drugs. And then it's proven to me that if God can remove that, which is all I was ever trying to do for the last, 2 years, 8 months of my life, my recent life, I've been aware that I cannot use safely. God has shown me that. The 15 years before that, solid 15 years, consecutive 15 years before that, I was trying to use safely. I was trying to use in a way that could work with my life. That meant that I could have a life and get to work, have relationships. I couldn't have any relationship. All the bedevilments on page 52 are there for me. My emotional life was a mess. I felt completely useless. I couldn't hold down a friend. My siblings weren't even close to me. They missed out a lot. My parents weren't close to me. They missed out on a lot of me when I was trapped in a room and I couldn't befriend anybody.
Yeah.
It's 6 and 7. Step 4 I couldn't wait to do step 4. What? Tell me about the part where I get to tell you about how everybody had wronged me and how nobody had looked after me, and all those boys who let me go off with some other boy at the end of the night. Like, the girls wouldn't have done that if I was hanging out with girls. If I was hanging out with my girls who I kicked out of my life in my early 20s, they'd have been like, who are you? Who are you going home with, Danah? They would have looked after me. I've seen how girls roll. That's how we roll with each other. The boys, if I was like snogging some heroin addicted dealer because I wanted to, because he'd given me loads of gear earlier in the night, and they'd be like, I'll see you later. And I'd meet them the next 2 days and they'd go, what happened with your night? Oh, I went off with so-and-so and had an affair with him for 3 months and moved him into my flat and all this weird shit. I didn't want to swear there, but I swore. It's all right.
Definitely all right.
Okay. So, those boys who had wronged me, those boyfriends, those sort of using boyfriends who had wronged me, my girlfriends who should have fought harder to stay in my life if they saw that I was in trouble. Happy to write all that down. Barely could find my part in it. The only part I could see on my first step 4 was, yes, I've kept this feeling about a person who hasn't actually even been in my physical life for the last 15 years.
Yeah.
I could see the maintenance of the resentments being my mistake. But no, I didn't see that I had sort of put myself in a position to be hurt. No way.
Right.
So yeah, happy to do 4. 9 worked with a little bit of, step 9 worked with a little bit of my British sensibilities and my self-loathing. And what I mean by that is to go around and tell people I was sorry was sort of fits with feeling less than and all those things. It actually has, again, a slight transferable skill is what I'm saying. Like, a little bit of less than can be a bit of a synonym with humility. They're not the same thing, but they can, it can dress up as it. So I was coming in from a point of less than. Now I could do it from a point of humility.
Right. Okay. Cool. Question 9. Which character defects give you most trouble?
Okay. I don't know if I can put it in a nice succinct headline what the character defect is. My want for a man, a boyfriend, husband, father of my children, and my want for children gives me the most trouble. It is there's some real like maternal instinct stuff going on that I just have as naturally as as myself, but it is intrinsically connected to how I feel that makes me being single and childless. I don't see myself as child free I see myself as child free on my good days when I'm feeling all right in my own skin, and on my bad days I'm childless, and it's something that I don't have that I do want. I feel like the world sees me as, yeah, can't keep a man, can you?
So other people's opinions.
Other people's opinions. Other people's opinions. Other people's opinions is the character defect that gives me the most trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rings a familiar bell.
Yeah.
Question 10. What is the best thing that recovery has given you?
Not to worry about other people's opinions. Recovery has made me realise that I am so unlike other people, all other people, not just other addicts, but actually we are all alike. I think we all have hopes and dreams. We all have things that we think we need and desire that will make us feel okay. We all have fears, and we can all experience pain. What might pain me might not pain you, but we can all experience pain.
Yeah.
And we can all experience love. What you might love might not be what I love, but we can all experience love. And I felt so unique when I was in my using and dark times and my suicidal times. I thought nobody felt like I did. You know, we are unique. We have our own. There's some unique aspects, but in the broad strokes, the important stuff. What's important to me is that I've come now to realise that we all experience pain and we all experience love, and I do have to chuckle at that because at how ridiculous it is to have thought that other people. I didn't see how other people were feeling pain. I told you about the thighs, right? You know, your thighs are thinner than mine. You have an easier life. That is what I thought. I have a harder life. Poor me. I'm the black girl in the... You don't get that. You don't get what it's like to feel alone in a group. Because people can feel alone in a group.
Of course, right. Even as a white, middle-aged, straight male.
Right. Yeah, okay. So I didn't know that. I didn't know that people could experience pain. I also didn't know that everybody experienced love. I thought love was sort of one thing, and that one thing for me is sort of family and children or whatever. Or it's a big thing for me. It's not the only thing now. I recognise that there's many loves, many forms of love that I have in my life that I didn't recognise. So yeah, it's made me feel wonderfully belonging to the world. I feel like I'm not as frightened of the world and my part in it. And I don't think, I used to think your life was only important because of maybe a number of lives you touched or how much money you earned and all these other values and things. And I don't think that anymore.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
Wow. Question 11. What would you say to a newcomer or someone wondering if they're an addict?
Right. Okay. I'd have to. I would try and keep it very, very simple. I would try and keep it very, very simple. I would say, try the steps and try them and do them to the best of your ability. I would say your guide or sponsor, the only difference between you and them is that they've gone through the steps. It's the only difference. They're not smarter than you. They're not better than you. They're not more or less in need of these steps than you. So the only thing you're going to them with are these steps. It's not you're putting them in some position that you're just asking somebody who's done something before you. You know, you wouldn't perhaps ask somebody, you know, to teach you to swim if they couldn't swim. And that's all that's happening. This person can swim and you want to learn to swim. I'd say try the steps and And, you know, you can have your misery back if you don't like them after 12, you can have your misery right back. And I'd probably, would I say look in that book for identification? I feel like I might, but it was quite punchy and somebody said to me early on, and I didn't listen to her. About 3.5 years ago, somebody said to me, look, try it for 90 days, try the work. You can have your misery back.
Yeah.
And now I'd say something quite succinct and punchy. It'd definitely be succinct and punchy.
Yeah.
And then try and shut my mouth. And I would say something like, all right, do the 12 steps, come back and chat to me about it. Here's my number.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. And our last question, question 12, which is, what do you want your higher power to say to you, quote unquote, at the pearly gates?
You did all right. You didn't do too badly, kid. Because I'd be like, well, okay, yeah. Yeah, I'd like to say you didn't do too badly at all.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Danah. You did more than all right for us today. And it's so brilliant. It was so great to have you. Thank you so much. I want to thank you for your courage, for what you shared, you know, for the exuberance and the flowy movement, you know. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. The pleasure was all mine.
We've come to the end of this episode. Thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed it and would like other addicts and alcoholics to hear it, then please make the pesky AIs and algorithms work their 12th step. Hit like and subscribe. While this pod is based on the 12-step recovery program, it's not officially affiliated with any 12-step fellowship. 12 Steps and 12 Questions is not substance or behavior specific, it's fully self-supporting and not for profit. And you know this next bit. It's not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization or institution. It does not wish to engage in any controversy, and it neither endorses nor opposes any causes.